Hey guys, welcome back. This is the second episode of my three-part series on my backstory. Hi, this is Norman Stickle, and I am bringing you this three-part series as I was asked early in my channel to be able to share my experience a little bit. I think more so specifically with some of the things that I have previously covered on narcissism and things like that. But I feel that a lot of those awarenesses that I had talked about previously and those experiences that I portrayed in these other videos that I have put up the roots of these stem from everything that has happened to me prior to those experiences. Most of those experiences I truly talked about in other videos really came about, throughout my I would say 20s and 30s, really. That was like the era for a lot of those awarenesses and that growth to happen. But I feel that the roots of those started, many years beforehand. The first video, if you haven't seen it or you're catching this one, the first video I covered obviously from birth to about 15 years old. And I believe I ended up finishing starting to cover and talk a little bit about my father and my relationship with my dad, and how it was leading up to a monumental change that was coming into my life unknowingly, even at the time. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start by backtracking a little bit. I had some awareness after I finished that other video, and as I was kind of focusing on what I was going to be being led to talk about and things to cover during this video, I had some awarenesses that popped up that I feel are necessary, that I not necessarily forgot, but I think they're important to the story to be able to put in there. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit, cover some of those things, and then I will fade and kind of work myself into about the age of basically from 15 to about 20 this time around. And then the focus is for the third video, if it stays in a 3 installment, it will be covering from about 20 to about currently, which is about 40 or so. And if for some reason it comes out that it's necessary that I make it a fourth, well, then I'll break that last segment down a little bit and do it that way, just because there's been such a monumental change these last, 5 to 10 years that it might, once I start actually exploring it and thinking about it a little bit more, it might actually be necessary to do it in 4 segments. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching, taking the time. This may be somewhat a little bit boring, but I believe in the overall picture of things. I like to portray not only my own experiences, but my own lessons and the things that I have accumulated with the knowledge that I've gathered throughout this lifetime and my experiences to be able to help contribute to the growth of others. And that's you that's watching this video. If you're choosing to actually stick around and stay and do so, I applaud you. A lot of what I talk about is very difficult. It can be eye-opening, and there's a good chance that it correlates with some aspect of your life, whether it to be something currently that you're going through, something you possibly might end up going through, or something you have been through. And all of our stories are unique within their own. They're one of those things that we can never fully understand what it is like to live in somebody else's shoes, because we are not that person, and there's so many variables of showing up as somebody else that it's not even possible. So I think there's something great to say about that, and it's a beautiful thing. Even in the despair and a lot of the darkness throughout life, there is such growth and so many things to be grateful for that I think a lot of people end up focusing on the negative, when if they were just to turn it around and change the way they see things, the world around them would change. So with that being said, a few of the things that I feel like I missed out on in the other video, I feel at the time it came out exactly the way it was, but because of the awarenesses, I'm going to continue. But, I want to backtrack just a few years. One of the things I did not cover was my schooling growing up. I don't have a lot of vivid memories from it, like a lot of other things in my life, but I do know that I was placed in a private Christian school from the time that I was in kindergarten till 5th grade. I do remember a few of the situations and the friends and things like that I did have. I can even remember some of their names. I have searched a little bit over the years as they popped across my train of thought with really to no avail. We all know and understand that a lot of friends that we have, childhood friends and at stages of our life, usually do not continue on at some point with us. They're meant to be there for our growth, our experience, and for a period of time, and then it's time to usher in something new. So, I remember small, short interactions. I had a teacher with the same last name as me, although it was spelled differently at one point. But it's difficult for me to really remember exactly what it was like. I feel that if I had to kind of feel it out again, like I still felt like I was a little bit different. But as far as like some of the seizure activity that I had and a lot of the other things, I don't know how active it was at that time. A lot of these things my family cannot remember or recollect. My memory, things like that have obviously shaped and molded me to not either protect myself or to not remember, because it's really not important when it comes down to it. It's just a fact that I have to accept, just like a lot of us. And it's part of our history and our story. So, the reason I feel that I was pulled out of the private Christian school is a little unclear. I don't know if it was financial reasons. I've heard a couple other reasons on the personal side of things, not because of me, but because of other extenuating circumstances. But I ultimately really am not aware of the reason why. Although the next stage of my schooling really changed things. Really took a dramatic turn. And looking back, it ultimately hindered a lot of my personal growth for a stage when I really needed it, being 6th grade to about 9th grade, 8th, 9th grade. I was in turn homeschooled, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I personally realized that was at a time in my life when I really needed to be social. I really needed, those things. And I feel that the group setting of being in 4-H and, just me and my mom and my sister and my father when he was working, growing up around all the codependency and all the limiting factors of everything I discussed in the first part, furthermore segregated my development from really growing and learning and being nurtured outside of this small, secluded core environment of people and influences. And I don't remember too much of the curriculum. I remember vague images of sitting at a kitchen table, going to 4-H, taking swimming lessons, things like that. But I do know that it was a time when I think it would have done me more good, so to speak, to be out around other children than it was to be, put in the situation I was. I do remember I had one close friend. I still remember his name and whatnot. That we hung out. I remember taking some swimming lessons and whatnot. But I remember still feeling like an oddball, a weirdo, just different than everybody else, not belonging. and wondering what else was out there for me. But like, it just accepting it was the way it was. I have not a lot of recollections of if and how many or at all of any really seizures around this period of time. Um, a lot of that is just blank, other than the monumental, stroke that I had at about 9 years old, or whatnot, and which I'm not going to do the math right now, but I know that I had a lot of significant challenges in my life. A lot of it surrounded my confidence, my emotional development, my direct influences of my family and my immediate family, my extended family, being my cousins, aunts, uncles, grandmother, things like that. Not having the presence of my grandfather, who was missing for a majority of my childhood. My grandmother was located over on the other coast of the United States for a period of time, growing up because of her job in the airlines. So my great grandparents were a big part of my growing up. I do have some pretty pleasant, happy memories of going over there and spending the night and eating oatmeal and being given 50 cents to go to the store and buy an ice cream cone and being like, hey, that's not enough, Grandpa, so there's a lot of good family memories, and a lot of this is coming up right now as I speak about it. But I feel that in my own personal development, that homeschooling was a big disadvantage to me, looking back. And but that was something out of my control. I had no say so over it, so I can't. There's no sense of dwell on that. There's no sense on, holding anything against anybody for doing those things. And I didn't really go. I was given the opportunity to go part time to a junior high school in 8th grade. My mother felt that it was best that we transitioned into public school. I'm not sure exactly the reason. I don't know if that was more or less for her or for us, but we transitioned, and I remember taking like 2 classes. And this was, I believe, around the time that we had moved, so about 15-ish or so, whatever the age and the grade would work out to be. But monumental landmark in my life was where we finally moved from renting to my parents owning a home. And that's where I think they had decided that it would be okay that we were put into school. My sister also went in. She was younger than me, and whatnot. And I remember, like, it was very weird, and it had been detrimental. I noticed it to my own growth because of the fact that I was already so different, but I didn't have the social skills necessary to really get along with everybody else, or to fit in, so to speak, or whatnot. And some of that could be genetics and just upbringing and stuff, but too, like, I was not exposed to a lot of that. I had a I had a TV remote control watch, and I programmed it to a couple of the TVs in my different classes, and I finally got busted. But I would change the channels in the little class, and I would turn the volume up and off and on. Just the most gentlemen, most people know and realize, are not as mature as females their age, but I think a lot of the underdevelopment and exposure to kids and situations and socializing at that age really contributed to my lack of maturity and development to a degree. So it was kind of a tough thing to get accustomed to. 9th grade, I went in full time. And some of these things are naturally and healthy. I remember making a paper Chinese star, and I threw it at my math teacher, and he made me get down in front of the class when they could still not hit you, but still like distinguish some punishment to you without sending you to detention. And I think I had to do 50 push-ups in front of the class. That's kind of his way, was to be able to set things straight. Little things like that. Like part of that's just being a kid growing up, but I think part of that is contributed directly to my influences and my lack of being socialized. But in ninth grade, I went full time. I don't remember exactly what the age would be then, but I believe it was, it still continued about the same. And around this time, I had a monumental thing happen to me. From about 15 to 16 was a very pivotal period in my life and very huge growth spurred. And it's starting to stir up a little bit of emotion in me. It's been 25 years, 26 years since this happened and took place. But, from moving and my parents finally getting a home and stuff, at 15, starting school and, transitioning from homeschooling into the public school system and, being at that age where I was really trying to find myself as a teenage boy. And, but shortly after moving and starting school and all these life changes that were happening on around me, that had happened previously a couple times already, but my parents had separated again. If I had to make a educated guess, it would be over finances. At this point, it's completely irrelevant, but a lot of couples are directly affected by conflicts and finances and key things within the relationship. But not only did they separate, my father became ill. And I don't just mean with the flu or a cough or a cold or a bug. He became ill with cancer. And I remember, for some reason, it stuck with me, but I remember, the fact that they had thought that he was hiding it for about a year, because I don't remember what spurred him to actually go to the doctor. Obviously, some of that was kept from me, for obvious reasons. But they found a lump up on his, in between his collarbone, off his shoulder, and the doctor said that they thought it was there for about a year beforehand. And I just can't help to think, but like, why would he do that to my mother? Was he scared? Was he in denial? And all these things have run through my head over the years of doing this. Thinking about this in completely different aspects and really having to deal with this loss at different stages of my life and peeling away the layers of this as I've matured and grown. This has been a 25-year process in a lot of sense. And it does get easier to deal with as time goes on. But at the same time, like, things might sit dormant within you. And an external factor might trigger something, and then it brings it back up. It happened last October, around my father's birthday last year. I had a big awareness and epiphany about an unhealed aspect of mine and my father's relationship. But in the midst of all the happiness of, moving and starting school and leaving the homeschooling behind and really like, yeah, this is it, and I was, even though I was different and I felt like the odd duck and stuff, I still I was getting into skateboarding at 15. And I remember I had a Alien Workshop skate deck and got to pick out my wheels and my trucks, and it was all about the independence. And I had a pluck naked chicken on the bottom of my board, and I thot I was just the shizzle. My cousin was 6 months younger than me, and um, he showed up in 44 size overalls when crisscross was still a thing, and backwards and had the hair lip thing going on and stuff. I mean, just weird memories. So there was a lot of good times. Like we'd go skateboard and hang out, and I did everything normal like any normal teenage boy would do, and sneak out and wreak a little havoc, and ride without a helmet on, and all these things. Even as a kid, go to the dirt track and BMX, and I grew up not far from the airport, and so I never wanted to live my life, like I said in my previous video, as a kid with a disability. And some of this is coming back to me now, even though I had previously thought about this. And I prefer to do it this way, kind of on the fly, because I think it's the most authentic. But, I never wanted to be hindered from growing, although I was. And I was really a prisoner of my own mind. Looking back now, that's really what happened to me. And, it took me a long time to have these awarenesses and to be able to gather this up. But with that, in the midst of being 15 years old and all these rapid, for lack of the better, great changes that were going on in my life, my parents had separated, and I was starting to act out a little bit, and whatnot. But really what happened, my cousin came over with a cigarette one day, and, I remember trying that, and it was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. My father was ill because he was a smoker. He smoked at least a pack a day that I'm aware of non-filtered cigarettes. His mother, my grandmother, and his brother had been both smokers, and his brother had passed away before him, I believe due to stomach cancer. So there was a lot of reasons why I should never have done that, but I did, and I have to own that 100%. Some of the other aspects of growing up was the mortality rate within my family was pretty low, or high, whichever is the proper way to say it. But, when I was around the same age, I lost my aunt to a drunk driver who hit her head on going down the freeway. And, that was the first of one of those episodes. At one point, my father lost his sister to, I believe, diabetes, I believe. Then his brother had passed away, and there was a lot of people that passed away in a very short period of time in my life. So death is something that is very familiar to me. And obviously some of them were not as close as my father was, but for a long time, that pivotal time of being a teenage man, needing to find your independence and learn and grow, but need that male role model, no matter what it was like. A young man craves that, or should. It's healthy. And you seek that out to a degree because of the fact that it's your dad. If your dad's not there, you're going to look for it somewhere else to fulfill that, And I remember, smoking a little weed and smoking a cigarette here and there and stuff like that, and kind of trying and skating without helmets and sneaking out a couple times and, kind of that rebellious little act, which I think is natural. It didn't have completely to do with my hindrance of being homeschooled and things like that. But I do remember at one point, my dad caught me lying to him about smoking. And that was the first time I really saw a side of my father that I never wanted to see again. And, for a long time, that stayed with me. And I had a real problem going into my mother's house. There was no physical fight, but it was definitely a flare-up of something that I had seen in my father before, and I never wanted to experience again. And it kind of instilled a little bit of fear and order within me, or it even maybe perhaps spurred the rebelliousness even farther. But at the same time, this is all during this period of actually after moving and finding out my father was sick and my parents being separated, I believe shortly after this process of this happened, because they think my father became ill about a year before he was actually physically showing signs, and they actually discovered it. I remember getting my first job and my permit, and obviously as a 15, 16-year-old boy, you have a lot going on. You want to get a job. My first one was a dishwasher. I think I had that job for about 6 months, doing homemade French fries through the potato machine and, washing dishes. And then my father became ill. And I left that job. So that year of 1996, some of it sticks out and other parts of it, I don't even remember. But what I do know is that year shaped the rest of my life and will continue to influence me deep, deep down until I leave this earth physically. And with that being said, what happened, the combination of trying to find the balance of good and growth within the bad and the negativity. I remember going to visit my father in the trailer at his sister's house before she passed, because my parents, like I said, were separated and whatnot, But when it comes down to it, $1995, my birthday, I turned 16, and I spent my 16th birthday in the hospital with my father. From the time he was diagnosed until the time he actually passed and left this earth from his physical body and lifted himself into the spiritual plane was only about 8 months. And I remember being so angry and hurting so bad and wondering why he would do that to me. And looking outside of myself for the blame and the guilt and asking myself, did I do this or what did I cause? And, which I believe is natural for a lot of people that don't have the complexity of thinking or the maturity level to be able to entertain and understand that it's not their fault. That each and every one of us owns ourselves and should take responsibility for these things. But that comes in time. Because some of these things are not just instilled in us, unless you have that authoritarian type of father, which one of my friends did have. He was a very military-style man. But I did not. I believe due to the female influences in my life. It was just a year of desperation and leashing out and just chaos in my life, really. I left my job, and I remember trying to get another job, and I eventually did it. I think Firestone, working as a tire guy, and whatnot, But that fall, when I turned 16, I spent it in the hospital with my father. And remember, we tried to go to school, and we tried to make life my mother tried to make life normal for us. Because now I realize that she did the best she could with the tools and resources that she had available to herself. She was trying to keep her head above water as well. And I think that even as kids, but even as adults, we place unrealistic expectations, not only on ourselves, but on others. And that really impacts and hinders a lot of us from truly growing. So with that being said, it is one of those things that looking back, they say hindsight's a bitch. It can be, I didn't harbor any ill feelings or anything like that against my mother. But at the same time, like, I now see it as a completely different angle and perspective. And nor will I actually ever truly understand what it was like. I do remember at one point, I don't remember if it was before or after my father actually passed, but my mother was wondering how we were going to pay the bills one day. I believe it was around Thanksgiving. It was around the holiday season. But I remember at one point there was literally a check that just showed up on the doorstep. And I did grow up going to church and things like that. And around Thanksgiving, I remember there just was a turkey dinner that showed up on the porch. Moral of that is you'll never go without. You'll always have everything you need. Even if it's not what you want, you'll have what you need. Because there's always a deeper meaning to something. There's always a lesson behind something. What can this teach me? What can I learn from this? How is this working to my benefit? Ask yourself that. Change the way you look at your perspective of things. But here I am, 15 years old, watching my father die of a debilitating disease. And I remember, him so-called sneaking off into the garage to not smoke in front of us. But you know what somebody's doing. Your gut is never wrong, even at that young of an age. Like, you understand. Like, you may not be able to connect the dots, but you know that something's not quite right. And he tried numerous times to give it up. Here I was being tempted with the same thing. And yet, it should have been so easy to say, hell no. But I chose to give it a shot and try it. And it took me a long time to overcome that addiction myself of smoking, even though I was directly impacted and influenced by it. I really urge you to dig deep within yourself and find the strength that you never thought you had, because it's there, but you really need to muster it up at times. And maybe it's a lesson you need to go through. It's all about the matter of the way you perspective and see it. And if you're truly ready to take it on, I don't have a lot of recollection of the holiday around my birthday and Thanksgiving and whatnot. For some reason, it seems like maybe we went to go visit my dad at his sister's house and had something there. I know that they had still, even though he was not like physically living in the home, my mother was still taking him to his appointments. We were still seeing him. We would still visit and things like that. I believe there was a period of time closer before he went into the hospital, never actually came out of the hospital, that he did come back home for a time. And they tried to make things work that way. So my order and timing of how things actually played out is a little skewed, just from the years and whatnot. But what I do know is, as 1996 rolled around, February 1st, 1996, it was snowing that day. My mother had been given, I believe, or somehow acquired a god-awful white pleather baby blue interior 1974 Ford Fairlane that we were driving around. For some reason, I call it the Great White Moby Dick. I don't know why, but I remember she used to pick us up in school with it. We used to usher her down to the end of the parking lot where we wouldn't be seen, all these things. And this was prior, to my father being actually in the hospital, but it had like the forced air heating where you had to like wipe the windows if you were sitting at a stoplight and stuff. It was extremely cold, clunky metal, all that, back then when they actually made a true metal car. But February 1st, 1996 was a day that changed my life because my father passed. I was able to let go of memories and things. It took me a long time to do. And I remember one to this day, I can still remember it clear as day, but I remember walking in the hospital at one point. I don't remember exactly how long my father was actually admitted to the hospital before not coming out, like where he went in and didn't come out. I don't remember exactly the length of period of time that was, but I do remember walking in and seeing him one day. His youngest sister, had given him a gorilla holding a banana. I think it had some embroidery in it or whatever it was, but he was holding it. And he was hallucinating, talking to the walls, eating the banana. Because the man was on 160 milligrams of morphine every 12 hours. He had gone from a healthy 160, 70-pound man, fit, worked in a steel warehouse, slim fit, muscular, from having the type of job he did and stuff. And his natural build, dark skin, dark tan skin from growing up in Southern California, tattoos all over his body, and, whatnot, But, he watched emaciated from the disease and, had been underneath radiation and treatments and, the emotional conflict of the indifferences with my mother and family and, me being a 15-year-old boy and lashing out and all these different aspects that you can get into and think about it all take effect on everybody emotionally, spiritually, physically, manifest themselves in discomfort and disease and stuff. But he went home that day and I was in there for his last breath. And it really took a while for it to set in and really realize what it was and that it was actually happening. It's still hard to describe exactly how I feel or felt at the time. It was kind of a big blank spot between that and about 17. Where I can remember like instances of things, of getting my first girlfriend who was a girl at church. I believe that was literally just a few months after my father passed. I met her through a mutual friend and stuff, I changed schools because I dropped out after 8th and 9th grade. I moved on to a high school for 10th grade and tried to go. And this was after my father passed. We did take a leave of absence from school, I believe, for a period of time. I don't remember how long it was, but I remember really then getting into heavily more so into drugs and experimenting and lashing out and things like that, even more so. My sister had her own, trials and errors. My mother had her, her own way of dealing with things. But me personally, I kind of just disappeared. And, looking back, I did what I thought was best for myself at the time, but I was not what I would call a good brother or a good son. And do I regret that? No, not by any means. But could I have done things differently? Absolutely. If I would have had the capacity and the mental capacity and the forethought and the maturity to do things differently, absolutely, I could have. But I can't change that now. So I've had to make peace with it. But I kind of did my own thing and I kind of disappeared, I tried to cover myself with the pain and the void and the insecurities and all the lack of confidence. And, it turned into codependency as I was raised in that kind of environment. And it made this switch of, why me and anger into, let me latch on to the nearest, closest thing that I can get a hold of so I feel safe and comfortable, and that was the start of what I would consider to be a faulty, deadly trait that I carried with me for many, many years. But it really wasn't the fault because it was necessary for my survival, I feel. And it was one of the longest running lessons in my entire life that I had to learn how to deal with. And I had to learn to overcome that so I could actually stand on my own 2 feet and want people, but not need people. There's a difference there. And And I think that is key to understanding codependency and narcissism and empath and all these things that we'll get into as I go through my story. But my maturity level was not great, which a lot of 15, 16-year-old boys are not extremely mature anyways, but more so because I was lacking so much of that influence. I was lost. I was scared. I didn't know what was going, all these unknowns and these fears coming up as, guilt and insecurity and these feelings, of course, that I really kind of just wandered. And I believe that relationship did not last for terribly long, and it rolled right into another one. And, which lasted, I'm pretty sure, for around 9 or so months. And even then, I was overbearing. Not only did she tell me that, but looking back, I see it. And I was clingy, and, I always had the need to know and try and control things. And I think that comes out of the void of losing and loss and emptiness and direct influence of the environment and the influences that I was brought up around. And I ultimately pushed her away. And I remember really being in conflict with myself of, wanting to do what was, best for myself, but really not being able to control those insecurities and that lack of confidence, which is not appealing to anybody, whether you're 15, 16, or whether you're 40. I feel it's not really attractive to anybody. Maybe for some people it is, but that's usually because there's something lacking within their own personal growth. There's a thing that is within the development of the subconscious mind, but not everybody will actually choose to make the shift at some point, but you go from a lot of, if all of your relationships, more so especially your intimate and romantic relationships, from a codependency into what is considered interdependent, meaning that you are then able to identify the difference between having part of your identity as somebody else and having your identity separate. People say, oh, well, my better half, and I wouldn't be this without you. I wouldn't be able to do this. That is somebody identifying with their partner or that relationship as part of their own identity. The same thing for a sports team. People will put on a jersey, and this is not meant to knock anybody. This is just my opinion and my blunt truth of my experience. But people say, oh, my team, my team, my team. And they wear jerseys with other people's names on them, and they really get into it, which is fine. If football is a passion or basketball is a passion, then that's fine. But it's not your team. You're not playing. You're not on it. And these are things that I learned. And looking back, these were the lessons that I should have learned then, but I was not ready to actually see it yet. And these are things that I've learned later that I've embraced. All right, tangent over. But with that being said, what I didn't get fulfilled in the first relationship and whatever happened there, I believe she had some feelings of some guilt and some other things, that she broke it off ultimately. And I remember being completely devastated and still being insecure and no confidence in things. And somehow that rolled into a second relationship where a lot of those feelings got intensified, which ultimately demised the relationship, and I even, before it demised the relationship, I ran away from home shortly after my father passed. I dropped out of school, and I just wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to escape when I should have been looking within and really focusing on, how can I better myself? But obviously the components of understanding that were not there to the maturity level, and the environment and all the outside influences were not conducive of me seeing those options and taking that route. And what happened then, eventually the relationship fell apart. And kind of the next thing I really remember, other than some of the rebellious streaks of, you know, sleeping places and living in a shitty trailer and, sleeping on the bathroom floor of a bathroom one night, cuddled up, trying to stay warm, taking the bus into the city, with random people back when you could still ride in, and whatnot, and whatnot. But the, the rebellious streak that came along with running away and wanting to do my own thing and the demise eventually, came apart. I ended up in California and escaping there, trying to escape there. And just, I thought that if I got out of there, all those problems would just go away. And I escaped to live with one of my half sisters that I haven't talked very much about, but I have 3 older half sisters from my father's previous relationship with my mother, who have been in my life, but have not been obviously as close to as my immediate family, and they've always lived other places. We have visited over the years, but she was grateful enough to take me in. But I thought by just running away, all those things would go away. And that, really brought me to another period of growth within myself that spurred a difference, in how I would mature and learn and grow and really either conform or try to figure out who and exactly where I fit in and who I was. So with that being said, I was 17 years old trying to figure it out. And it was an okay process. But at the same time, I don't think it was right for me to just leave all my problems in my family and my mother and my sister behind. But I did what I thought was best for me at the time.